everyone, I'm Sanjana and today my seminar would be about environmental sustainability in the Indian housing context. The future is back. Architecture, which has been a bit out of focus lately, is once again alert. Sustainability came to the rescue, setting goals, objective tasks and challenges. And the new paradigm is readily absorbed. Architects can save the world again. They advertise their sustainable practice and ecological design. Schools offer master courses in sustainable design, while the building industry provides sustainable solutions and the governments compete in a contest of sustainability politics. Sustainability has become a politically correct term, a label that makes whatever you want to do acceptable and good. No question asked and no doubt involved. So when we look at housing in specific as a building typology, we have three stakeholders in any project: the client, the designer and the end user. But in terms of housing, we have the developer, architect and resident. What is important in the case of housing is the relationship between these different stakeholders, because say for example in a school or a museum, the end user does not associate the project as home, or it is not so sacred to them. But when you talk about housing or a home, it becomes more important, because for the end user, the resident, they are buying a commodity of an apartment or a house for themselves. So for the sake of this presentation, I would like you guys to align yourself with either being a developer or being an architect or being a resident. Just take one and pass on each color. And what is important is, when you think like a developer, you think like a business person. It is your business that is going to go into loss. It is you who is going to face the loss and the profit. Can you take one and pass? And you need to have one of each color. When you are an architect, one of each color. When you are an architect, you are thinking as a designer who is designing a housing complex. And as the resident, I want you guys to think as the closest non-designer family member you have. So say your parents or your grandparents or your family members, and if they would be okay with this idea of sustainability. What is your role? A developer is typically an individual or entity responsible for the financing and overseeing a project. An architect is someone who designs the buildings and structures that are not only aesthetically pleasing but functional, safe and in compliance with the regulations. And the resident refers to an individual or family who will eventually live in one of the housing units. So for example, if I have bought a house in Omax Height in Lucknow, Omax Construction is the developer, CP Kukreja is the architect, and I become the resident or the end user. When we look at environmental sustainability in an Indian housing context, to make it a success, there are three basic criteria that it needs to fulfill. The practice or the system needs to be environmentally sustainable, it needs to be economically viable, and it needs to be socially acceptable by the three different stakeholders that are there. If there are less number of flags, we can share. When we talk about social acceptance, how the residents look at social acceptance is very different from how an architect or a developer look at social acceptance. So for example, for a developer, when it comes to sustainability has become like a replacement of an amenity, or it has become like a selling point of a project. While as architects, we feel that sustainability is something which is either too serious a topic to deal with, or a topic which makes us more morally correct or politically correct. But when we look at the resident, we're not sure if they really agree to or they care about when it comes to sustainability or environmental sustainability, specifically in the housing context. When we talk about economic viability, this is just an example. So 40,000 to 70,000 per kilowatt hour is the price for installing solar panels in a housing complex of 50 units in India, and we produce about 1 lakh to 3 lakh kilowatt hour per year. So when we look at economical viability, when the developer is financing a project and a resident who is the person who has to take care of the maintenance of the system, or the maintenance or the cost efficiency when it comes to repairs or damages of a sustainable system, and the architect is of course someone who's designed the system but is not economically affected by it. These are just types of certifications in India that we follow: the IGBC, the Greha LEED, or ECBE system, where the buildings are given points according to different sustainable ratings, and then they are certified based on how many points they collect. So now I will be showing you 3 different projects, and I want some of you all to do the role play of a developer. So can I just have a show of hands of how many of you all would like to look at these projects as developers? Okay. As architects? Okay. And as residents? Okay, so again, just a reminder, when you're thinking like a developer, you think about a business person and not about the aesthetics of the building. If you want to, you could. As an architect, you think as a designer or as someone who's designing the project. And as a resident, you relate to the closest non-designer person that you know. This is Humanscape in Auroville. It is a non-certified sustainable project. It is a project that is sustainable and has integrated urban living. It is a mixed-use development. It uses a lot of passive techniques and technologies to promote sustainability. It has a lot of it deals with a good water management system, and something it also emphasizes on, apart from environmental sustainability, social sustainability, where the house dwellings do not have private bathrooms, but they have more common spaces. There are a lot of common community spaces. And so, like for example, a 4 BHK in this project has 2 common toilets, and it doesn't have individual toilets attached to the bedrooms. So for this project, if you are aligning yourself as a developer, these are the probable key points or information you should keep in mind if you are saying that you would build this project. A green flag is a yes, red flag is a no, and yellow flag is a maybe or ambivalent. So as a developer, you would get awards and recognition in Auroville, higher profits for the context, but some residents might question the lack of certification, and you would have to pay 15% more construction costs without any certification from the agencies. So as a developer, would you build a project like Humanscape?
Right now it's just developer. You're asking developer.
Yeah, as a developer. Are there any green flags?
No.
Okay. As an architect, would you design a project like this where you would get awards in addition to your portfolio, moral fulfillment of responsibility towards the society? Okay. Any red flags? So you wouldn't design a project like this as an architect?
You are trying to influence it.
Okay, and as a resident, you would have to pay a higher price of 10% to pay for a non-certified sustainable project on the word of the developer and an architect. There would be a 4 BHK with no attached bathrooms. There would be a lot of shared amenities and community spaces. There would be maintenance charges, etc. So would you buy a house in a project like this? Are there any green flags? Okay. The next project is Park West by Shapurji Paranji. It's designed by RSP Design Consultants. It's in Bangalore. It is a project that is a IGBC certified sustainable project. It uses a lot of energy efficient systems and a lot of green pockets and sustainable materials so that the embodied energy of the building is lower. It also has amenities and shared spaces, but it has a lot of amenities and it has a lot of green pockets to reduce the heat island effect in a city like Bangalore. It is also deemed to be the example of a sustainable project in the cityscape of Bangalore. So as a developer, would you build a project like this? You would get higher profits for a certified project. You would have to pay 5% more of the construction cost for all the process of obtaining the certifications, and there would be awards in recognition for doing a sustainable development in Bangalore. Are there any red flags? Okay. As an architect, would you design a building like this that aligns with the ideology of sustainability, would win you a lot of awards, and it would introduce you into the design community of Bangalore with the motive of environmental awareness?
Last bit is not true.
Okay.
It is very niche.
So, just one doubt. So, when you are asking this question to us as architects, it's not about how the design looks, whether you will end up designing the way the building looks, or is it anything that which is certified LEED rated?
No, I think I'm asking about this building in specific. If you were a designer who's signing these plans to be passed and be built, would you be a designer who would take credit for a project like this? Okay, why do you think you wouldn't?
Looks banal,
Yeah.
monotonous.
If sustainability was not the aspect,
That's why I asked
at the
if you are
process.
saying it will look like this, I don't want the awards and recognition.
Okay, and as a resident, would you buy a apartment in this project? Yeah. Why wouldn't you buy a project in a apartment? That's what I'm saying. As a resident, it is a non-designer opinion that you have to give.
She still feels bad.
Yeah, but
Yeah, fair enough. I'm just.
are you conscious? This is I think I'm saying, ask, are you conscious?
बनाल पता ही नहीं होता
Huh?
what is going
Ah,
on.
No, but you know the
Forgot fires architect.
Imagine we ask someone from the admin or someone who has absolutely not even admin of CEPT, go and ask some doctor or some other lawyer or some professional. So you have to think who have, I mean, I don't want to claim that those people have no sense proportion or scale, but रेटिंग है और amenities है, rating है।
I feel like it will also be like a social status for them.
हाँ वही yes why not swimming pool के
Irrespective of how much we have to put into it.
sorry
Irrespective of how much they have to pay later to maintain it also. Like so many trees, non-people will be coming.
But then again, I'll correct my guess here, they are the third.
yeah just some bragging
But
rights.
especially for a doctor because bragging a very healthy lifestyle. Like, yeah, I swim every day, I jog.
I live
in a sustainable. Yeah.
So I had also done a survey about whether people would be okay using grey water recycling to wash their cars, to water their plants. And every non-designer that I asked, they would be not okay with it. In fact, when I told my father, he's the closest non-designer resident that I know, he was absolutely against the idea of recycling grey water and using it to wash the car or to water the plants. So I think as designers, the way we look at sustainability, or maybe the systems in particular, the tangible systems that we might be okay with, a lot of residents do not think about it that way because they are paying for a commodity of a house or an apartment. They look for their comfort or or what they're getting out of it at the topmost level of priorities. This is the third project. It's the Urban Oasis in Ahmedabad. It's by Grid Architects. This is also a IGBC certified building, and it endorses and encourages community living. At the same time, it reduces carbon footprint and uses a lot of energy efficient systems. So it has 4 blocks: north, south, east, west. The north and the south blocks are the taller blocks, and the east and the west blocks are comparatively shorter. And right at the middle of these 4 blocks, there is ecological garden that they have maintained that has all the native species of Ahmedabad, the tree species. And on a normal day, on a silent afternoon, you would hear birds chirping and the water trickling down that stream that is there. So for this project, as a developer, would you build a project like the Urban Oasis? And as an architect, would you design a project like Urban Oasis? And as a resident, would you buy an apartment in a place like Urban Oasis?
So the percentages are different in different projects.
Yeah, it's
based
also
on-
because of the scale of the projects. You wouldn't buy.
Yeah, 25%.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you?
It's 25% more than.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's 25%. I don't care so much for the environment. Huh?
So why wouldn't you buy? Is it because of the cost?
It's first of all because of the cost, and even in spite of the cost, if I buy, like if I'm having to use grey water to wash my cars and use in my toilets, and when my guests come in and they ask how's your building sustainable, and I have to say that I'm not buying a project for that much high price for that.
Paying 22% extra to wash grey water. Paying extra 22% to wash with grey water.
First give more money, then use grey water. With 25% extra, I want distillery water, RO water. There are people who use RO water for their cars. Yeah, because you get sedimentation if you wash with hard water. You need RO water. If I pay, that's what it is. I'm paying 25, I better get RO for my car.
What apart from that ecology?
There are water management systems, there are rainwater harvesting systems, there is a lot of solar panels that they use on the terraces.
Then why are you just talking about ecological garden when you are telling us?
No, I said they use other sustainable systems. Also because of the ecological garden, because they advertise their building based on that ecological garden.
They were selling it as sustainable. Maybe these are the one who will buy for sustainability, they know what sustainability is. Then maybe they will check all the parameters. If I'm that educated that I know what sustainable is, then I won't fall for the trap of a ecological garden.
No, to the materials
But actually-
here are also sustainable.
And you need to tell me, na, I don't know.
So, why I showed these 3 different projects and why we had a difference of opinion as a developer, as an architect and as a resident is more complex than just a definition of sustainability. Even as designers, we can never end up on the same page for sustainability because it is a plural concept. So not just in terms of definitions or the textbook definitions of sustainability for architects, but also the different stakeholders involved, especially in a housing scenario, because there we have the architect plays a much less role as a stakeholder than a developer or a resident does. These days there are quite a few certifications where you can get a label to stick on your building. This building is energy efficient with 702 points. But it's more complex than that. You can put up zero energy buildings that has destroyed a neighborhood or does nothing for public space. If you destroy the cultural heritage and value of a place, it isn't sustainable in my view. Creating a living, healthy place to spend time in involves much more than energy reductions. So a lot of difficulties with trying to implement sustainability in the Indian housing context is also because there are a lot of knowledge gaps. There is the initial cost that is involved. There are technological gaps that some systems have. There is lack of awareness, enforcement and implications. And lastly, the dynamics between the stakeholders. Because the developers and residents have a direct relation to the project in terms of the money that is spent or the cost they pay, they become sort of direct stakeholders, and the architects usually become indirect stakeholders where implementing a sustainable system or not, or if a building gets certified or not, is not about the end user or the developer. It is not about the money that is involved for an architect. This was just to sort of bring everyone back to the role of an architect and think about what sustainability is to us as a group of designers, and then maybe we can take it to a housing context to have the conversation between the developer or a resident. Even when each of us would try to define sustainability, we would never end up on the same page because it is a never-ending debate. And maybe it is good that sustainability does not have a fixed or coherent definition, because if the technical question of energy efficiency or the technocratic questions of efficient resource use or even the questions of socio-economic management end up constituting the definition of sustainability, this will threaten to reduce design to a series of small decisions that will ultimately have less to do with design and more with the management or with the political correctness of sustainability. That's it.
So after doing this, what is your opinion or your personal position on sustainability? In the sense, you didn't raise any flags since you were present here. Just curious, as an architect, which ones would you big flag?
I think I would green flag Humanscape and Urban Oasis, but I would red flag Shapoorji Balaji.
That was the first one.
Yeah, the one in oil.
And you would red flag Shapojiko. That was the certified.
Yeah, so this is also a reason why I picked Park West and Urban Oasis, because both of them are certified sustainable projects, and yet we have a difference of opinion in the two of them. Probably because of monotony and they look banal, or how visually the building is looking. But apart from that, Urban Oasis sort of finds a middle ground between Humanscape and Park West, where it is a commercial building. It is where the residents are purchasing certified sustainable project. But at the same time, it is not a commercialized sustainable project.
What I find interesting also about Open Oasis is that while they publicize the project, they do bank on the LEED certification. They have some certification, the LEED certification to project the image, whereas they also did some other measures like the grey water and also all the amenity spaces, the parking is in the basement, and their entire space is a non-parking zone, like there's no cars that enter it. So these still parking spaces, these still areas also, they have amenity spaces. So even in the heat of the sun, it is actually very cool in the ground floor places of that. And these are, I would hope at least that people would expect these spaces or they would want to live this. But it's never also publicized from a design perspective also, that they have designed to make certain things like this in mind.
I think the visual of it is, when you call it banal, it is because it's a very high-rise building which doesn't have much connection with the ground. That ratio is totally different. While in Nine-Grade Architects project, that building is very grounded. But I think there was also a problem where they stopped it at the 4th floor. I guess initially the plan was actually to go to, so this horizontal building was actually supposed to go to 7th floor or 8th floor. But then that comes down. If that would have actually gone to what it was planned initially, then I think the quality of this, we are actually voting for the visual of it rather than the sustainable part of it. So I think that is what. Also, if you I don't know if you know the project Good Earth Malhar from Bangalore. So that's a project where what they are trying to actually do is I don't know the expanse of it, but I think it is situated onto 50 to 80 acres of land. They are having bungalows over there, which is that's a total sustainable project. But then at one point, they actually have introduced high-rise high-rise buildings, and those apartments are something where they are using that FSI. So they are actually basically trying to make it commercial. Good Earth Malhar.
How do you spell it?
Good Earth. GOOD.
Oh, good.
Malhar. MA.
Footprints? This is the building.
Yeah. So this is, I think, the main entrance of it. But if you go into the inside, it will have the pathways, and that's how all the houses are connected. All of those bricks are also built on site. Also, all of this grey water and everything, they are ready to use it, because also the clients that the people who are living in these houses are people who were actually interested in buying this kind of houses. So that is where I think it actually works, where community comes together to say that yeah, we are interested in doing this, and then they are using it. But I think putting it onto large scale projects is difficult. There is also building for that.
What?
An apartment. So
In the same campus, there is an
Terraces.
apartment.
Just like terraces. But terraces. Terraces.
I guess that's fine with the stuff.
So when you are asking this question of cost, since you are talking of it for both the developer and the user, say something like earthquake resistance. Before 2001, at least in Gujarat, people were not very particular about it, although it was always in zone 3. But after 2001, everyone became particular about it. Now, earthquake resistance comes at a cost, additional cost, if you want your buildings earthquake resistant. No one is asking, neither the developer nor the end user is saying, don't make it earthquake resistant and reduce the cost by 5%. Right? So, I think it is important to discuss that when do people start, for what things do people suddenly start becoming cost sensitive? Because there are a lot of things for which people just accept that this will be an additional cost and I have to bear that cost. Like in Ahmedabad for a long time till Narmada water came, everyone was digging a bore well and we reached a stage where bore wells were going crazy depth. And you have to pay a huge cost for not only digging the bore well, but the submersible pump and electricity costs are huge. No one was debating that additional cost. So I think this, we also need to ask this question that why is it that when it comes to sustainability, we suddenly become cost sensitive? Right?
In fact, we were discussing it earlier that earlier rainwater harvesting was not a mandate.
Yes.
But then there came regulations where you have to
Yeah.
implement rainwater harvesting. So in the survey that I had taken, I was also asking people if they're aware, if their complex does rainwater harvesting. And there were only about 9% people out of like 60-70 people that I surveyed who knew that their apartment complex was doing rainwater harvesting, even though it is a mandate. Because it is a mandate, irrespective of the cost, people are paying for it.
Yes.
So, if it comes into a regulation only, then will sustainability be practiced?
I have a question. Like when you were showing us this scheme, what you were focusing on was like you also have the preconceived notion that अगर माल बेचना है तो amenities दिखानी पड़ेगी. But if your motive is to like educate people that we need sustainability, should not your advertisement also be like that? Like this is a huge cost. Even my apartment has that borewell, which is almost all the maintenance, which I'm paying. But if I advertise like I have to use my money, I'll like abhi barish hui to I'm like saving all the water for the year, something like that. If I'm advertising it in that way, I'm anyways using money, pani ke liye. But you are also selling it immediately. If you believe that sustainability is important, should not your advertisement also have that? And I also tend to believe in our
I don't think I was trying to advertise any of these projects.
You were showing only
I was
amenities,
just-
that's why I'm
Yeah, because so when you see a dwelling unit, even in a sustainable project, if there is recycled grey water coming in your tap, you can't see that system. It is not a very tangible system of sustainability that someone faces. It is a building level system.
For example, ELN जो दिखाया, they were also advertising peace, serenity. That also you cannot see. Still they were advertising even showing Buddha or like I don't know that Japanese bowl which they showed. So intangible things are also advertised. No?
If I may interrupt, and the clients understand the language of amenities and they buy houses looking at the amenities. So this, I'm talking about the urban oasis project. Even the brochure was attracting clients by by selling amenities and having that sustainability was there in the brochure somewhere. But end user understand that language. So I think as a celebrity and as a market person, so we need to, the people who are staying here are conscious about
that. Why can't the sustainability thing become an amenity?
That's what
Why
I
should the advertisement
people don't understand that
Because it
language.
doesn't sell.
So how do you sell that 25% which you are paying extra? Because that amenities are being seen common throughout the thing. So where is that 25% coming? I say, how do you explain that 25% to the client so that
If I don't
they
explain
come
them the
and-
sustainability, like all the systems which they are using, how will I sell? I won't get 25% for just a garden. That's what I'm saying.
Of course not, but the point was never to explain the systems or to, like for example, a non-resident, if I go to explain the entire grey water recycling system to them, not all of them will understand it. It is only when a resident specifically asks you to explain it will someone endorse the whole system and tell you which tank is where. Usually what you sell is something that is tangible, that's something that they visually can see and experience to a non-designer.
If we start thinking this in your presentation itself, you said that the difficulties are that there is a lack of knowledge and there is lack of awareness. So the minute we also start thinking this way, then the knowledge and awareness is never going to spread.
I am the one who spread the awareness.
हाँ.
And if I only say that कोई मतलब नहीं है समझाने का, amenities बेचो. So I mean,
So
I was
the
never
great-
proposing the solutions. I was just giving information about the projects as they are present, as the builders endorse.
The great architects for a project did in their brochure they do mention that it's a sustainable.
And the green that they have in balcony, see, if you provide green to someone and it's a compulsion कि ये green तुम्हें रखना है, then there is a maintenance, कौन काटेगा, कौन पानी देगा. But that project does not, the entire people at that 25% cost want to benefit, right? So people come there and maintain their greens and it's naturally, automatically irrigated. So that the end user don't have to worry. And since the greens are also provided, the AC, the load of AC is also reduced and this is told by the client itself. So even I had a chance to.
If I could simplify this, you're paying 2 lakh rupees per semester right now. If I ask you that please can you pay 25% more so that a student who maybe who doesn't have that much financial aid, will you pay 25% extra?
But people who have financial aid will select this kind of projects. Not, it's the end user and it's the community who's going to select these kind of projects. So it's not for everyone. You cannot.
Then it's not a scalable option. That's the whole point.
Then it's not. Then sustainability. You're saying that sustainability is something that is not affordable and that is defeating the purpose of it. Where we are saying that it's something that should be practiced almost everywhere, not just in terms of housing. It's probably within this institution technically it should be practiced.
If I could just.
Which is why I'm saying that one way in which society does it is that it makes laws or regulations when they think that people will not do it otherwise. Why is it that we make explicit laws or regulations as a society, not only for architecture, any regulation? Our fear is that without that regulation, people will not act in that manner, and therefore the regulation tells people that this is what you need to do, and if you don't do this, this is the penalty. So, and some things we don't enshrine in regulation because we assume people will act like that.
Talk about the grey water being used or something like that.
I think there was a STP made in our devices, but it was not functioning when we asked the secretary. So it was not functioning. So once the management is given to the society, sometimes things don't work,
Yes,
and
yes.
it gives some bad examples which can be
Also, like Atharu says that his buildings are sustainable.
Yes,
Like
yes,
in those
yes.
conversations, but he will say that. So
Everyone,
any same person will say that what are you saying, but he has his reasons for saying that it's
Yes.
sustainable. And it is to some extent, like his projects do for it.
Yeah, true. Yeah. He has a he has a long explanation for why his buildings are sustainable. But I think what it brings out, of course, what you also mentioned is that there is no one sort of definition in everyone. That is both a strength and its weakness, because then it allows anyone to say anything and say that it is sustainable because of this. But the good about it is that it says that there is no one way of making it sustainable, there are different routes.
What do you personally think is sustainable according to your definition?
I don't think I have an answer yet. I don't have an answer.
Okay, let's move on to the next presentation.
But I think
Yeah.
the closest thing that I have come across is the responsible use of resources.
Responsible use of resources.
A very good evening to all of you. I am Nirja Joshi, an L3 student at the Faculty of Architecture. My topic for today's seminar is prefabricating a home. So, here it goes. The age of the machine was a transformative era that unfolded over the late 18th and the 19th century. It was an era that ushered in a new age of innovation, industry, and progress. There was a clear shift from products to processes and an atmosphere of doing more with less, be it less investment of man, of material, of making time. Now this shift mainly brought about a rise of mills and factories that in turn brought about a massive influx of people to cities, placing a new demand upon urban infrastructure. Small towns turned to cities and cities in turn swelled. Hence grew out an imminent need to house not just the production but its producers itself. Now, this need for a faster infrastructural development led to the eventual industrialization of the building process itself. The first call for industrial housing came about in Europe and the United States between the wars. There were architects experimenting with concepts of mass housing set upon a rule of standardized components. Thus, prefabrication kind of made its way into the housing industry. A few examples to name, like the Dymaxion house by Buckminster Fuller, or the packaged house by Walter Gropius. In the Indian context too, the industrialization of the building industry made its way in the later 20th century with the emergence of what is called as the Hindustan Prefabrication Limited. Now this was a solution to the housing crisis that emerged due to the Indo-Pak partition. So now, while prefabricating in a controlled family environment does ensure quality, faster and efficient construction planning and a very low maintenance, then why does the construction industry in India still have such a grim face? Be it an abandonment of ongoing construction sites due to periods exceeding project deadlines, structural indurability, problems pre-occupation, or the very high maintenance post-occupation, there is clearly a need to shift from on-site construction to off-site prefabrication. Why then prefabrication still not being accepted in the housing industry of India? So then, is there a need to define prefabrication so as to evaluate its role in construction? Is there need to be a greater understanding of this term itself so that it can make its way into mainstream construction? Hence, my first question to all of you for today, what is your definition of prefabrication? Here are two images for your reference. So yeah, if anybody from the audience would like to answer this. Yes?
Prefabrication is prefabrication is almost even as you see there was a game of assembly and disassembly where these components are being made at the factory off-site and then brought to site and then assembled to make the structures.
Any other answers?
I think also when it's basically a construction method of assembling, manufacturing entire building components like floors, walls, etc., and then assembling them on the construction.
It is also extending to that, it is done by predetermining certain factors that you're anticipating would be required in the construction, and therefore maybe for different factors like economizing labor, your time of construction and such.
Any insight from the master's batch? What is prefabrication for you? Everybody? So I'll move on. So now, having known all of these definitions of prefabrication, I would like to put forward a scenario. So now on one side you have chairs which are mass manufactured in a product factory, probably by a product designer. But on the other side you have Frank Lloyd Wright, who designed all the fitments and furniture that went into the making of the Robbie house. Another example, again on one side you have chairs mass manufactured in the factory. While on the other side, we have Mies, who went all out in his design process and realized the bigger idea of the Barcelona Pavilion, even in the chairs that went into the making of this place. Well, not just chairs, talking about, for example, door handles. So now one side we have a rich, diverse collection of door handles, be it different shapes, sizes, colors, textures, whatnot, to fit the theme that the architect has in mind. But on the other end of the spectrum, we have Zaha Hadid, put forward an entire line of door handles called the Chevron, custom made, customized for her building at the New York apartments. Another example, on one side we have a door handle factory making its components on the factory, while on the other side we have mad architects who carried forward the formal inspiration that they had in mind for their absolute towers in even the door handles that went into the making of this project. So now I would like to put forward another question. So then, can an architect take up roles beyond architecture? Is there really a beginning to architecture, and is there really an end to it?
Are you asking, should architects design go to designing door handles also?
So on one side, as you saw, there was an architect picking up a door handle from shelf. On the other side, you saw Zaha Hadid designing the door handles for a project. So now, do you think an architect goes beyond just doing the architecture and should also concern with designing the door handle of the project?
Does it add any value to people?
Yeah, that's the question. Does it add value to the project? Does it add value to the role of the?
My question is back.
Yeah. Yeah. So does it add value to the project itself?
To the people's life, what do you say?
But then, if you take the example of door handles, it's more about the utility. But then, I think it becomes a bigger question of how important do you think is that door handle as compared to this big tower that is there outside?
I have a question for that.
Yeah.
If there is an ant which is moving here, and if I scale it down to whatever 1 is to, say, 0.01, that stretch that ant to that level, will that ant still function on this surface?
No, it won't.
Yeah, so basically if I'm making that building, like in this case, I'm not talking about the previous case, in this case, if I'm having the same structure of the building and converting it into a handle, there is a different complexity that goes into both of them.
So you are trying to say you will not do it like this, but I think the question she's asking is, should an architect design a door handle?
Yeah, they should.
That's the question she's asking, not this door handle.
That I've quoted, yeah.
I also think it depends on which architect is designing the door
You.
handle. If I designed it, I don't think people would care. But if Zaha Hadid is designing it, I'm sure they will be like, wow, what a door handle. Of course, but I'm saying there is also a name attachment to the kind of furniture that is made. Also because it is one of a kind, but also because, say for example, the chairs in Barcelona Pavilion become special because they are in the Barcelona Pavilion or because who they are designed by.
But the question is, say when you become as popular as Ramveer, will you design
Would
it?
you consider it as
I would.
you
But
would?
then I think it's too micromanagerial of that architect saying that I can control, I am in, or thinking that I am in control of the smallest details. And I don't think at least I would want that because I know there are a lot of aspects and details when the house is being used
say, I won't be able to do it.
But maybe the intention is not to control it, but to start the, like for example, the handle does not restrict. It's not like it's doing anything restrictive from a normal design. It's just that you are starting the initiative of doing that handle. So then,
More than controlling, it's you carrying forward your idea, very strong concept to the end detail in your project.
I guess then it depends on the
So
architect.
yes. So that's what I'm trying. Okay, so
we are like to give
She's
answers.
asking you.
No, I mean like if I want to justify my design, maybe not. Like you said the example of Frank Lloyd Wright, he even designs the crockery. I mean, it then again comes back to that question that what is home is that I'm giving freedom to people, whatever they want to do, or even I'm
I think if you give me money, I will design your AC, I will design your fan.
Okay, so let me take you to another scenario. So moving on and away from singular elements to maybe systems of such elements. So now here's the image of a door handle exploded in its mechanism along with the way it locks. So now if an architect can design door handles, should the architect also design the very screw that goes into the making of the door?
We would go with it. If he's going to the test period, might as well.
Might as well.
Yeah,
If you are doing the door.
Till the extent of designing the door handle and the whole mechanism of the lock.
If door handle itself is the product, then I would do it.
And what if it's your building and the door handle that goes along with the building? Yeah, so I think there is a certain degree of importance that we kind of attribute to this. So then you would say that might as well realize the idea at a bigger scale and not in something like as small, unimportant I might say as it is.
Is it about more about experience that we are having throughout the building? Because these are the things that we are actually interacting with. And if they don't have those in place, they do not, if they don't support the building that is going on, I think that's where these people also find a need to actually intervene and design it. So yeah,
We should. Now scaling up, let me take you towards one of the most basic building unit, a brick. So now towards the left is the mass manufacturing of bricks in a kiln. While on the right we have the Irish architect couple O'Donnell and Twomey who gave out even the dimensions of the bricks that line the facade at the LSE building in London. Further on, here's an example of the residence named the Lagos House by MAPA with prefabricated concrete beams and columns that are brought to site, lifted off the cranes and assembled panel by panel. Steering it back to the Indian scenario, we also have an Indian housing scheme, which is the SRA scheme by BJTI Architects in Mumbai, wherein prefabrication of concrete panel takes place off-site. And these panels are kind of transported in trucks lifted off of cranes to be put panel by panel to finish the entire project. So now gradually moving away from building units to the whole building being one unit. We have the Dorteway Residency by Bjarke Ingels in Denmark. So now the first image itself shows the whole housing unit as a kit of parts packed together in a Lego box. While the last image shows children stacking together these units as if it was actually done on site by the architect himself. Another example is the LA Star apartment by Michael Molson Architects. It's a residential housing complex catering to the needs of the long-term homeless poor. Now individual apartment units are entirely constructed off-site and then delivered to the project in terms of cranes that are put atop each other over a structural podium. So now, should you build it brick by brick or build it before you actually build it? Now, if all of these are prefabrications in one way or the other, should an architect pick up a chair, a handle or a brick off the shelf, or should the same architect design the same chair, the same handle, the same brick from scratch? Do you think there is a value judgment to these contrasting scenarios?
I think it's based on your experience or your skill at doing it. I might not, that architect is skilled at doing furniture design or product design, they might do it. If something's not in my thing, I might not do it. So there's no jack of all trades, I know everything. There's specialization for each people. Correct. So I think that's all.
Okay. So, having time and again kind of compared between in situ casting and off-site prefabrication from the domain of civil engineering, I would like to now put forward an architect's take on it. Since prefabrication is manufacturing off-site, then is this painting painted by Zaha Hadid in the 1970s without a single thought about the Vitra fire station that stemmed out of the same painting 20 years later in 1993, be called prefabrication? Another known example is Corbusier and his study of the modular, which contains sketches, one of them being an early rendition of the open hand which was done in 1943. This same open hand finally vocalized 50 years later in the Capitol complex. Now, while studying these proportions, I'm sure Corbusier didn't have the slightest idea of this hand being replicated as one of the most important symbols of modern day jumping. Another example, we have a model inspired by the studies of the human body proportions, specifically the male torso, undertaken by Calatrava, and he proposes this sculpture in 1943. But it was almost more than 50 years later, in 1993, that this kind of materialized into a residential tower in Sweden. Now, he didn't have any idea about this building coming in 50 years back when he was studying that male torso. Steering it back to the arena of housing. So here are books with an extensive collection of plans suiting different plot sizes, different family sizes. A few architects in Ahmedabad too have a pre-designed book of plans which are kind of designed even before acquiring of the site. Not just established firms, but we as students at Oikopolis too have a pre-designed bank of rules, regulations, design considerations, and at times even unit plans designed with a very strong concept before acquiring of the site. So, yeah, now if all of this, if you consider is prefabrication, then can a design also be cast in situ on site? For example, we have Nari Gandhi here who put together the entire Jain bungalow in Lonavala without a single working drawing that was done before site. Ultimately, if prefabrication is the production in a controlled factory environment, can Zamtar peacefully sketching out his ideas while sitting at Atelier Zamtar be considered as prefabrication, while the same architect designing under his client in the studio be called a design casted in situ on site? Thus, I'd like to conclude my seminar by putting forth my last question for the day with reference to two images. On the left is a line of workers working on fibers in a factory, while on the right is a line of architects designing on their drafting boards in a studio. So my closing question, or I might call my opening question for today is, can ideas be prefabricated?
I think they get paid the same. But you took quite a turn from prefabrication and construction to prefabrication. But any responses to 10 ideas we prefabricate?
There's no limits to thoughts. So, obviously, you are actually saying there are multiple ideas that's probably going on in my head. But it's just the right way of using that idea. You can't just like that put something because you wanted to implement that idea. Like there are other factors that's controlling it.
But so yes, I agree that thoughts in that sense can come anytime. But at least the examples you were giving of the open hand or the turning torso, they are quite specific. It's not like it's not like Corbusier's Museum of Infinite Expansion, which is a diagram, and the Tokyo or the Ahmedabad is a variant of that diagram. That, I mean, we could also ask that question, is that also prefabricated, or is that turning torso, which is like, it seems to be very clear, at least from the two sets of things, that it is exactly the same thing.
I think the word is
what can be said as prefabricated can be preconceived for somebody.
Yeah.
As in, when Prabhujan made the drawing, he wouldn't have even realized. It is very scattered in his head when he made it. If the building is that's very constructed, prefabricated can be used for something which is like very clear in your head. It is already in the mind. This is how it will be made.
Yes.
The thoughts and ideas are not prefabricated. I would say it is preconceived. Some notions very well.
So then what about those unit plans that were being talked
That
about?
has also evolved this.
Like saying, there are people who have
Specifics can vary, but
unit plans readily designed.
But then what if you do have like a really complete vision and you're trying to reproduce it, then wouldn't it be called as prefabricated? I mean, obviously the architect's role comes into play when he's trying to put this vision into a site fitting contextually. So I think that's the whole job of the architect.
So are we trying to also question if prefabricated ideas are appropriate or
I
mean, because a prefabricated idea would never be contextually appropriate or would never be contextually appropriate for the immediate context whether it is there. Maybe the concept was used to something very abstract. So then as individuals, then it will determine whether we value that or not. Therefore, we will say whether we will take up prefabrication and at what level also.
It also depends on, we don't know Calatrava or Corbusier, whether they toyed with the idea of doing that in some other context, but they said no because it doesn't go well in the context, or did they not do that? Because you could also have a book of plans, and every time you look at a context, you might be asking, is this contextually relevant to this situation? And if it is relevant, I do it. If it is not relevant, I don't do it. Or I could be sort of blindly, where you are arguing that if you are doing it blindly, then the problem is it's not contextual. Because the idea was formed when you didn't have a site or a. But the assumption there is that if you begin designing after you get the site in the program, then your design is contextually relevant. But then there is a batch of 40 students, they get the same project and they come up with different designs, which means only one of them is contextually relevant.
So that's why I'm saying that then your definition of context is also varying for each person.
But the context is the same for every person
By context,
designing
I mean,
on the same plot of land. Take all of you, if you get the same plot of land, everyone will do a different design and everyone will have their own narrative of why it is contextually relevant. Either we have to agree that out of the 40 only one is truly relevant and the other 39 are not. If we say that no, all 40 are relevant but in different ways, then it means that there is no singular way of being contextually relevant. It's purely your ability to weave a narrative of why it is contextually relevant, which is making it contextually relevant. I don't know.
But I think the root cause might be same. I think if 40 people are designing it like this, maybe if we have commercials coming towards the street area, probably everyone might have stick to that particular context, but the inner ideas might change. But the root cause, when it comes to root cause, I think it might that might remain same.
But the people who don't have commercial on that stretch and have it on this stretch, they are giving some other justification for why it is here. Which means both are contextually relevant.
Approaches are different.
Yeah, so if you could have different approaches for the same project inside because the architect is different, then what is contextually relevant?
So then appropriating it, say you take a house plan from this and it's appropriate enough to be put in this context, and then making more changes that would be reappropriate.
Okay.
Yeah. But then contextualize, I'm not sure, but contextualization would be something that would be inherently a part of your design. while you're imagining it, like while you're designing it.
That means that we are valuing contextualization based maybe on our design process and not based on whether the final design has value.
Possible. Because while designing, we are always thinking of contextual relevance.
Like for example, the final design, I may not have thought throughout my design, I would have done a conceptual diagram that is irrelevant of it.
Yeah.
But at the end, I get to say we can give a narrative around it. Does that mean that it's something meant to be relevant?
Yeah.
That
So by making this comparison, are you suggesting, you started off by saying that the advantages of prefabrication are that quality control and fast, because you gave examples of deficiencies of cast in situ. Are you trying to suggest that prefabrication of idea has the same advantage that prefabrication in construction?
Isn't that what we do in that?
Yeah, that's the example I kind of gave here also. That we if not all out, we are doing certain degrees of prefabrication are embedded in our
I think about the security capability. I cannot design it when I get the project, but I can keep a bank of at least these kind of ideas.
when we if you're talking about studio processes, then if we know already from the time you get your studio starting process, from the time you get into the studio to the time when you start the design process and we know as a design, for example you're designing a museum, do we tend to redesign already, or is it just because in housing in housing only because we're finding so many problems we are tending to design, or because otherwise at least for my personal case, and when the posters are done, before I went into the studio I know what I'm going to be designing. In the sense of program wise is something I know, but even then I never redesigned before I got it.
So it's absolutely not about redesigning. You might have certain image, even though if it's blurred, but some idea that you have in your mind. The minute if you're told about designing a museum, you have some blur, something in your mind for sure. So all I'm saying is that all of these visions are there, back of the mind, I don't know, but they're there. Maybe not consciously realized before getting the site, but I think parts of these pigments do exist.
Yeah, I think it's just a word thing. While designing, the context might not be at the center, but then there might be a lot of in our last time talk, we had a site with a possibility for a lot of play of volume. So that was not my primary concept, but because the site allowed that kind of an exercise, it was possible. I tried that. But yeah, that's all I'm saying, that it might not be contextual, but some design could only be possible given that in this site.
Yeah, so I also think that, say when I did a museum design last semester, maybe I did have a clear image of how the museum is going to look, but it's not necessary that it manifests into the final project. But when we look at the time problem in our studio, because we also have a crunch of time, we have more solid pre-designed blocks. It's not an image that we have, but it's a hardcore plan that we have in place. So I think there, when we look at the entire studio process, because there's no crunch of time in a short notice, we don't tend to give that image a lot of importance because it's not going to come through. But specifically in our studio, we do give it that importance.
But it's a fascinating question to ask that are we, would we do it in a non-housing project, right? If you are getting a museum, would you already design a museum the moment you give first preference to that studio saying that let me start? And are we doing it here only because it is housing?
I see some architects in history, they did it they just painted and sketched it out of their imagination, and when they got the chance they made it.
Yes.
Not necessarily
Yes.
from
Yeah,
the
and
next
that
project.
idea I can fix in mind, but the design of it.
Yeah,
So
so
she's talking
idea.
about idea.
I am talking about abstract.
No, even design, there are examples.
Yeah,
You
BF
yourself
design
showed the
unit
turning torso, for
Yeah.
example, or the Museum of Infinite Expansion. The diagram people are doing incomplete. There are other examples also, especially in modernist architects, where they did some projects without a client. They are designing a house, and when they find the right client and the right plot, they are, of course, it's not they are not able to put exactly the same design, but it's they just use that design. So you are not starting after you get the project.
So I'm not sure there can be a good or a bad side to pre-designing. I think it's just a part of preparations that we are undertaking. I mean, I'm not saying that you have to stick to that prefabricated idea. It's fine. If it's not working, you let go of it. You work on something else. But it's just, I think there is a certain presence before.
Is it that for housing this designing previously was because it's related to time or something?
Yeah, the time
to
crunch
build housing
time.
fast, if museum takes for a time, it's fine. But I don't know.
I was just thinking in that terms, I just remember like Kelly when he designed, he crushed, I mean at least he said that he started by crushing a paper and that formed completely insulation for the building. So then in that case it's not a constraint of time but he's still prefabricating an idea. But I don't know in what timeline and figure it is, like whether after the site he started with this or not. But in a way that is also a prefabricated concept that is getting later appropriated. But it is a concept that is irrelevant of even the program or the site.
I know a lot of young architects who are starting their practice. So when you start off your practice, you don't get enough projects to be working on it full time. So some people work in some other office. Some people I know of, they just do projects, unbuilt, unfinished, no client projects. They're just designing because what else do you do in your time? And then, I mean, even famous architects have these unbuilt projects. There's one kind of unbuilt projects where the client was there but the project never finished. But there are architects who just do projects just like that. It's a figment of their imagination. They're doing it. The pragmatic reason is they have a lot of time at their hands and they want to just indulge in the act of designing. Sometimes, like if you look at Calatrava and his turning torso, sometimes the assumption is sometimes because you are designing it without the pressure of a client or a site, these are so-called pure ideas. They don't have any considerations of climate, site, project, client, function, program. They're just designing. It's like pure space. A lot of architects, for example, enjoy doing competitions because in a competition you don't have a client. So there is a lot of creative freedom that you get when you do a competition which you don't get. Doing a design on your own without even a competition brief gives you even more freedom to design whatever you want. And then somewhere 40 years down the line, you look back at it and you feel, hey, it's a great idea, why not make a project out of it?
In that way, I found it was interesting, at least in the examples, that when it came to a prefabricated building in India, it still looked the same as a in-situ building. But at least in an outside context, there were different explorations, at least visually from that it had different things that you would expect that the constraints of your client or context should be there. But still,
This ties back to our conversation when we were having about studios that a lot of times architects repeat their concept.
Yes.
Due to a lot of constraints, clients or something, they don't get to work on it as nicely as they would have liked to. And so they do it again as a different way.
Even if there is no client constraint, if I look at a Frank Lloyd Wright and all his prairie houses, now what would you say is prefabricated? Because he's already saying that all my prairie houses will have horizontality, will have sloping roofs, will have windows in the corner. So parts of it are already pre-decided for that particular context, and then his Usonian houses are a different idea. But and in his case, he's doing it even though it's not a client time pressure. So I think there we are getting into grey zones of how much is, at what point do you call it a prefabricated idea? Are all prairie houses prefabricated ideas? Or would you say no because the plan is not the same, just certain characteristics are the same?
This prefabrication thing actually, I feel that in what form is it there in my head? So is it in visual form? Because if it is in visual form, I'm going to stick with it for a very longer time.
Yes.
But if it is in a sentence form or maybe in some sort of different sense, then it will have a lot of different interpretations of the kind of shape it is going to take. And I think maybe if it is not in a visual form, it will help me to make that thing very contextual. If there is only an existence of a idea in a verbal sense, maybe.
But somewhere we'll have to draw the line to say that will not be considered prefabrication. Because if I take one step further and say it's not even in verbal form, it's in the synapses of my neurons in the brain, then we'll say that actually nothing we do is new. Everything we do is based on our life experiences and some memories that were stored in our brain, and they are emerging. So then, that if I go in that extreme, everything is prefabricated. And in philosophy, then people get into this question. Some philosophers are saying that everything that you do in your life is already predetermined by your past experiences. You are just not aware of it. But then if we take it to that level, one could argue everything is prefabricated. So we'll have to say that maybe verbal ideas also one doesn't know, maybe they are not, it's too, like you're saying, non-visual to be non-final for it to be considered prefabricated. So if in that example where Zahadid is doing the door handle, and if she did not personally design the screw of that door handle, would I still consider the door handle to be designed by her? Or would I say it is partially prefabricated? Or if the metal that she used was not invented or discovered by her, someone else's metal, that is also, so somewhere in this handle also we'll have to say screw I am not, even if you are using prefabricated screw, pre-designed, it is still not a prefabricated handle. I have to make some cut-off line. So similarly, I would imagine for design also we have to make a cut-off. Even I am not sure whether the preparations you are doing for your time problem, how much of it is just preparation and how much of it is prefabrication. Because some of it might be preparation. So at what, where is the analogy of the screw here? What of all the preparations that you are doing would you call prefabrication? Is the question we need to ask. And what are the, I would still like to go back to when you are talking of prefabrication in construction, you were talking of certain advantages and disadvantages. I think then the larger question is that if you are prefabricating an idea, what are the pros and cons of it? I am sure there are advantages and I am sure there are disadvantages. So the disadvantage that is coming up in the discussion is that it is not emerging from specific contextual factors. It is emerging from generic contextual factors. Because when you are pre-designing for the time problems in this studio, you already know it is housing in Ahmedabad in 2023. So time as a context, climate as a context, geography, culture of people as a context, you are taking that into account. It's only the shape of the plot and the exact location of the plot that you are not taking into context. But one could argue that is a generic context, it's not a specific context.
Maybe in that sense I was thinking like the prairie house. It's a preconceived, a prefabricated idea, but also Wright didn't apply it outside a specific region. He used only houses the other alternative because he couldn't take the prairie house beyond the limit.
Yes,
of the
yes,
US.
yes.
So then it does have that site limitation or site idea.
Yeah.
But maybe just because the scale is much blown up than we are imagining as a site. Maybe that's why we're not considering it as site appropriated.
He also proposes this thing on top of a high rise, and then it seems to actually the horizontal parts of it puts it onto a glass commercial building, and that is something which is like not accepted, and it never gets built.
I think in that case, this is like an architectural language that has like he has carried forward through all the projects. But then if we see, for example, the preconceived idea of lift being opposite to a staircase, and that day while you were discussing that we are following that, is it because it's efficiently working throughout these years? But then we still find that monotony of having staircases right opposite to the lift. So then do we continue this as a pattern because it's working, it has been working well since all the years, because it was a prefabricated idea in all the projects? Do we try to move away from
You are saying that in a different way, you are saying that if we start prefabricating it might lead to monotony, because you have said that here is a very good lift staircase
that has been
combination which works very well, and I'm going to just use it in all projects.
Like the horizontality is also a factor. Maybe then I think the difference in that monotony is that here physically it is being repeated like as a configuration, like whereas the prairie house has certain concepts, like horizontality is like a concept in its own, physically manifests physically, so therefore we don't find that monotony.
Yeah, so in this context it also comes down to, okay, so what are the off-the-shelf things that you are doing where you are using it as it is, and what are the ones that you are modifying? Maybe right now here it is put as a duality of off-the-shelf versus from scratch, whereas you are saying that the prairie house is neither off-the-shelf nor from scratch. It is somewhere in between.
Picking up like even the door handles when it comes to housing, it is not prefabricated because you are attaching the screw to the door on site. So if you start, so there is that degree also.
True. And I think the prairie house, I would say that the idea is off the shelf, but the manifestation of it is from scratch for every project, right? The idea of the horizontality and the rooms, its configuration is off the shelf. He did it for one entire region and he said, I'll use this idea, I'll keep repeating this idea again and again. But the lift staircase is like fully off the shelf. But I'm just for the discussion, if the rest of the floor plate is non-banal, would it bother you that the lift staircase combo is banal?
If the handle bothers, then I guess lift and staircase would also bother.
That, to me, that's the other way of asking the question of people who are designing the door handle, or Frank Lloyd Wright who is designing the crockery. Is your architecture so fragile that picking a door handle off the shelf is going to completely devalue the project?
Or is your architecture so strong that you feel that it should manifest in the door handles?
It will become so strong only if it manifests in the door handle also.
Like, if it manifests at every space,
find that architecture.
Yeah, that's like the Norman Foster example I was giving, that in his university building in Sheffield or somewhere, he has specified, because he has done white carpeting in that project, in the contract with the university he has specified that no red wine shall be served in the university because it has white carpet. Because the university wanted Norman Foster, they had to sign that agreement. Because he doesn't want, because even if you spill it and you ask for a replacement white carpet, it won't be exactly the same. And if it's not exactly the same, the architecture will suffer. So then I'm controlling the lives of people. I could say you can't dress in a particular color. Like if you read history of Bauhaus, they used to have parties like this in their buildings, where you had to dress up in a specific way because you're going in a specific building. Otherwise, you can't wear a very sort of colorful dress in a Richard Meier building or Barcelona building. It is jarring for the architecture. So I don't know whether that is great work of architecture or a very fragile work of architecture. No? That small thing is going to.
We want to maintain our freedom at the cost of someone else's freedom, basically, and controlling certain factors.
Yeah, so that is one part of it, this desire to control. But even if that is not there, sometimes I wonder, so if you look at Roby House or any of the prairie houses or Falling Water, if I change the furniture in it, how much will the architecture suffer? Will it suffer as much or not? I think of that in all buildings. Like if I look at the School of Architecture building, the tables, the stools are nowhere like what it was originally. Does it affect the architecture, or is the architecture powerful enough to take all sorts of interventions from people? And what is your sort of larger strategy? Because some architects do believe that that I should design the door handle also because I want that. Some people say that how fragile my building is, that if the client changes the door handle, then the quality is lost. But the power, of course, of this desire to control is also an important point. Okay, on that note, let's conclude. So thank you everyone for attending, and I hope the conversation spill over into the studios.